compulsion to understand became a sickness in me, a psychic parasite fed by the twin horrors of the beach house and the long-buried pizza delivery. The comfortable, predictable patterns of my life, the school runs, the client meetings, the Saturday morning lawn mowing, felt like a fragile stage set, and I was waiting for the backdrop to tear and reveal the true, dark emptiness behind it. My research intensified, shifting from casual online searches to a methodical, almost obsessive investigation. I took a personal day from the insurance office and drove the 2 hours back to my decaying hometown. The pizza place was long gone, replaced by a sad-looking laundromat. The air, however, still had that same soupy, stagnant quality, smelling of sun-baked asphalt and forgotten things. I went to the local library's archives, the microfiche machine whirring like an anxious insect in the silent room. I found nothing about the address or a Jerry, but then I broadened my search. I looked for any reports of strange occurrences, unsolved disappearances, or even mental health calls in that general area from that summer. And that's when I found it. A small 3-paragraph article from a week after my delivery. A local man, a reclusive hoarder named Gerald Jerry Miller, had been found deceased in his home. The cause of death was listed as a heart attack, but the article noted the deceased had a history of severe agoraphobia and paranoia, and that neighbors reported rarely seeing him, though he was known to order food delivery sporadically. The article mentioned the house was in a state of extreme squalor. My blood ran cold. Gerald Miller, Jerry. He wasn't a criminal. He was a prisoner. The police weren't staking out his house to catch him. They were likely there for a wellness check, or perhaps monitoring the property for another reason entirely, maybe related to the squalor and its public health implications. The instruction to park on the street behind the house and knock on the back door only wasn't a trap. It was likely his standard procedure, the only way he could interact with the outside world without being seen from the front. He wasn't hiding from the police. He was hiding from everything. The curtain twitch wasn't a predator assessing bait. It was a terrified man peeking at the world he feared. The police's stealthy approach now made a different, sadder kind of sense. They were trying not to spook him. My delivery had been an event in his isolated, fear-soaked existence, and my knock might have been the final stressor that stopped his heart. I had been an unwitting agent of death. This revelation should have brought closure, but it did the opposite. It created a terrifying symmetry. The man in my beach house crawl space was also a Jerry, in his own way. A man who had retreated from the world, not into a house, but into the very walls of one, claiming it as his own. Both were squatters in the margins of society, one through fear, the other through feral entitlement. The universe, it seemed, had a pattern, a recurring motif of hidden inhabitants and violated sanctuaries. Driving home, the memory of Taylor in the field haunted me with renewed force. If my two experiences were connected by this theme of intrusion and hidden spaces, where did her story fit? It was an open field, not a confined structure. There was no wall, no door, no crawl space, or was there? The concept of a thin place from Celtic lore came to mind, a location where the veil between this world and the next is whisper thin. What if that field was such a place? Not a doorway to a spiritual realm, but to something else, a layer of reality that was adjacent, almost identical, but fundamentally other. I became a man possessed. I tracked down Taylor through the ghostly trails of social media. It took weeks, but I found a married profile under her maiden name, Taylor Evans, living in Oregon. With a trembling hand, I sent a message. Not a casual, "How are you?" but a blunt, desperate plea. "Taylor, it's Chris. I know this is out of the blue, but I need to talk about the field." That night, something has happened to me, and I think our stories are connected. Her reply came 3 days later. It was short and guarded. "Chris, wow, I haven't thought about that in years." "What do you mean connected?" We arranged a video call. Her face, though older, still held the ghost of the girl I knew, but her eyes were wary. I told her everything. The pizza delivery, the beach house, the man in the walls, my research into Jerry Miller. I laid out my theory that there are places in the world that are somehow soft, where the boundaries fail. I saw the skepticism in her face, but beneath it, a flicker of profound recognition. You think, you think that's what happened to us? She asked, her voice quiet. You think we slipped? What else explains it, Taylor? I said, my voice edged with a desperation I couldn't hide. We both experienced the same thing from opposite sides. The time loss, the changed atmosphere, the dim stars. We both called each other and the calls never happened. Our phones didn't malfunction. Our memories aren't wrong. The world itself was wrong for a few hours. She was silent for a long time, staring at her hands. I never told anyone this, she finally whispered, because it sounds insane. But when I was there after I realized you were gone, it wasn't just that you were gone, Chris. It was that the emptiness felt different. It felt full, like I was being watched by the air itself. And for a second, just a split second, I thought I saw something, a shape way out in the field. It wasn't an animal. It was tall and thin, and it just stood there, and then it was gone. I convinced myself it was a tree or a fence post my mind had twisted. But there were no trees. A cold certainty settled over me. The hidden inhabitants weren't always in walls. Sometimes the hiding place was the world itself. The man in the crawl space, Jerry and his squalor, they were tangible, physical intruders. What Taylor described was something else, an environmental one, a glitch in the simulation, or an occupant of a reality so close to ours we only notice it when the walls between them temporarily crumble. I think we crossed paths, I said, the theory forming fully in my mind as I spoke. I think for those missing hours, you were in my version of the field, and I was in yours. Or we were both in a third, empty one. And the thing you saw, maybe that was the permanent resident, the thing that lives in the silence between the seconds. We talked for over an hour, the shared terror forging a bond stronger than our years of silence. Before we hung up, she gave me one last piece of the puzzle. The spot, she said. I never picked it at random. My older brother told me about it. He said kids used to go there on dares. They called it the slipping place. There were stories, old local legends, about people going there and not coming back the same, or not coming back at all. I thought it was just a stupid ghost story. I didn't believe it. The slipping place. The name was perfect and horrifying. It confirmed everything. These locations were known, whispered about in local folklore, their dangers sanitized into campfire tales. But they were real. Armed with this new terrifying knowledge, my perspective shifted once more. My mission was no longer about understanding. It was about fortification. I sold the beach house. I couldn't bear the thought of it, no matter how well the crawl space was sealed. The money went into buying a new, modern home in a development where the land had been farmland just a few years prior. No history, no hidden spaces, no folklore. I had the soil surveyed. I had ground-penetrating radar check for any anomalies, any old foundations or tunnels. I was erecting a fortress against the uncanny. But the fear is insidious. It has seeped into the foundation of my soul. I look at my sons and see not just their bright futures, but their terrifying vulnerability. The world is not a safe place. It is a patchwork of safe rooms separated by thin walls, and we are all just one wrong turn, one strange delivery instruction, one stargazing trip away from finding a crack and falling through. The story doesn't have a neat ending because the phenomenon it describes is ongoing. It's happening right now, in a quiet house somewhere, in an empty field under a dim sky, in the life of someone who just received a strange request and is about to knock on the wrong door. The horror isn't in the monster you can see, it's in the terrifying realization that the map you have of the world is missing crucial and deeply unsettling topographical features. And once you know that, you can never truly feel at home again. The memory of that sticky summer night at the pizza place had fossilized in my mind, a bizarre but isolated fossil from my youth, until the incident at the beach house last year shattered the glass case I'd put it in. For 2 decades, I dismissed it as a strange fluke, a collision with some low-level police sting where I was an unwitting, insignificant pawn. The Jerry who ordered that god-awful sausage and olive pizza was just a name, a ghost in the machine of a failing restaurant's ordering app. But after finding that man, that thing, living in the walls of my father's house, his eyes wide with a feral possessiveness, his hands smearing unidentifiable filth against the glass door that separated him from my family, the past reconfigured itself with a terrifying new clarity. The scratching in Jordan's wall wasn't a branch or a raccoon. It was the sound of patience, of quiet, malignant occupation. The breathing I heard, deep and human, was an echo of the silence that had greeted me behind that white door years ago. Suddenly, the pizza delivery wasn't a random event I'd stumbled into. It felt like a dry run, a precursor. What if Jerry wasn't the target of the police stakeout, but something else entirely? What if the person inside that house, the one who twitched the curtain but never opened the door, was like the man in my crawl space? Someone who had claimed a space that wasn't theirs, and my knock was an unexpected intrusion on their domain? The thought was a cold knot in my stomach. The two events, separated by time and geography, were now fused together, forming a new, horrifying narrative about the fragility of the spaces we call safe and the silent, patient things that can inhabit their edges, waiting for a moment of vulnerability. The police officer back then had been vague, talking about an ongoing investigation. I now wonder if he was being evasive not to protect the investigation, but because he didn't fully understand the nature of the occupant himself. Not a criminal in hiding, but a squatter of a more profound and unsettling kind. A person who blurs the line between man and something else. Someone who sinks into the very structure of a place until they become part of its plumbing and its nightmares. This new fused fear bled into everything, coloring the world in shades of paranoia I'd never known. The comfortable boredom of my insurance job became a welcome refuge from the terrifying silence of my own thoughts. I found myself obsessively checking the locks at home, not just once, but 3, 4 times a night. I hired a contractor to do more than just seal the crawl space. I had him open up every wall, inspect every attic inch, install motion sensor lights not just outside, but in the hallways. My wife, Sarah, thought it was trauma, and perhaps it was, but it was a trauma that felt like it had roots in 2 separate soils, both now poisoned. I started researching local news archives from my hometown, looking for any mention of that address, any cold case, any report of a missing person named Jerry. I found nothing, which was somehow worse. It meant the story was truly over, a forgotten file in a dusty cabinet, while my own story with it was still being written in the frantic beats of my heart every time a floorboard creaked. The beach house, our sanctuary, had been violated in the most intimate way possible, and the ghost of that violation now haunted our suburban home. I looked at my sons, Jordan and Scott, with a love so fierce it was painful, edged with the terror of what could have been. The man's words, relayed by the detective, echoed incessantly, for intruding on his new home. It wasn't a random break-in, it was a territorial dispute. He saw us as the invaders. This warped perspective connected him, in my mind, to the silent presence in that delivery house. Both existed in a world where boundaries meant nothing, where a wall was a door and a home was a prize to be taken. The peace we'd worked so hard to build felt like a thin veneer over a chasm of chaos, and I was constantly waiting for the surface to crack again. And then, in the midst of this consuming dread, I remembered the third story, the one my old friend from high school had clumsily brought up, the one I'd initially forgotten, the story of Taylor and the stargazing. It had seemed like a teenage mystery, a glitch in a friendship, perhaps a misunderstanding amplified by cheap wine. But now, through the lens of my own experiences, it felt different. Her description of the world feeling off, the sky dimming like someone had turned the brightness down, the unaccounted for hours, it no longer sounded like a simple case of 2 drunk teens. It sounded like a dislocation. What if, in that empty field, they hadn't just lost each other, but had briefly slipped into different layers of the same place? What if the field, like the house with the crawl space and the delivery address with its silent occupant, was one of those thin places where the barriers between what is ours and what is theirs wears down. Taylor and I, we both woke up at 3 a.m., alone, each convinced the other had vanished. We both experienced the same profound existential fear. We weren't lying to each other. We were both telling the truth of our own, suddenly isolated realities. The thought is almost too large to hold. It suggests that the world is not as solid as we believe, that there are pockets of silence and shadow where the rules are different, and that sometimes things and people can get lost or worse, found by something that was waiting. I haven't spoken to Taylor in years, but I now feel a connection to her that transcends our faded friendship. We are members of a club we never wanted to join, people who have brushed against the hidden geometry of the world and felt its cold, indifferent edge. My story isn't just about a pizza delivery or a home invasion. It's about the terrifying possibility that the sense of isolation and freedom I once loved about summer nights was never freedom at all, but merely the temporary illusion of being unnoticed by whatever or whoever else is out there in the quiet dark.